Well, before tonight, had anybody heard of the Glocal Meteor Network? I'm just curious. So you had actually heard of it?
Yeah. Well, we talked about it last time.
Well, before that, had you ever heard of it? Well, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I don't think.
I think I have because I've reported stuff before, and you run into it when you go to report things. I think.
Oh, it's those, the first two should be when,
So they're opposite what they should be.
yeah.
Well, this is the first time I'm giving this presentation, but I'm going to hope to give it several more times because I want to convince people to perhaps deploy some cameras. So this is what I'm going to review tonight. We're just going to briefly go over meteor networks in general, then talk about what a Global Meteor Network station is, and I'm going to abbreviate it GMN a lot. So I go back and forth. It just depends on how much space I have. I'm going to cover my, I put experience, but I think involvement would probably be a better word. I'll have to remember to change that later. And then we'll briefly cover building a station so you get some idea what's involved in it. But first, we were already talking about this. We've got two particular things we're going to look for with a meteor camera. One is meteor showers that we're all sort of used to, the small particles, grains of sand that create meteors out there. And two could be fireballs that may come from an asteroid origin. And they're typically going to be the bright ones like you were just discussing, a bolide level event. That maybe we've got a meteorite fall. Now, a network of cameras is particularly useful in finding these. For instance, it's not on the slide, and I thought about incorporating it. I actually have a video file that was recently in New Zealand, a fall that they found, and a number of the GMN cameras tracked it. So they knew within half a mile or so where it landed, or that was their estimate, and they found it almost to the spot where they thought it would fall.
It just happened.
Yeah, it just happened.
Yeah, because I've seen pictures of
Yeah, they have
like meteorites, and so I'm on all those groups.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I've
it
seen
just happened.
pictures of the stones they found.
That's a particularly good example of, there aren't that many meteorites that have been found that have been instrumentally observed before. There's only like 50 or 60. I think it's like 50 some. You may know the exact number better than I. There was one in Germany. I think it was Germany, either late last year or early this year as well.
It's increasing because, like with the Ring doorbells and all that kind of stuff that people have on their homes now, when there's that big flash, if it's in the field of the doorbell,
you get a little bit of help.
You get a little bit, and then if you have multiple locations in a city that all, security cameras or whatever, that helps.
It also helps if you have meteor networks.
Yes.
Ring doorbells and individual cameras are helpful, but they're not really producing any scientific data. You may be able to predict a fall, but you're not likely to be able to backtrack the trajectory that it came in. In other words, its origin very well. So that's really the purpose of meteor networks. This is a cute little video, but you've already brought up the fact that we actually do get sound in there. Watch this, and this discusses why you want more than one. I thought it was kind of neat. So.
There we go. We have 4 stations there. 3 dogs and a guy.
Yeah. Included dogs, that's what got me right off the bat. But pairing is a very common term they use in this in networks.
Wait a second.
I thought it was pretty cute. I think it's a pretty good explanation of what they You know, the reason why you need 2 or 3 stations, I don't think any of those equations are the right ones, but there's actually quite a few meteor networks. I don't know if you go to spaceweather.com, but if you do, on the bottom of the page, there's the NASA All-Sky Fireball Network, and there's several cameras that are deployed across the country. That's a relatively small network. The biggest network prior to the Global Meteor Network is CAMS, which is Camera All-Sky Meteor Survey. I think that's what it stands for. But CAMS and the Global Meteor Network both kind of go back to the Croatian Meteor Network. They were some of the early people that were looking at using low-cost cameras to actually try to capture meteors, as opposed to much more expensive scientific. The Synodico, you might have heard, they've been around quite a while. They're a Japanese group, and they use software called UFO Capture, and I've always found that name just killer. But it's software you have to buy. CAMS uses their own in-house software that was developed with people from the Croatian Meteor Network, as well as a couple others in here. Their software is not, available, and their data is a little more restricted in how they put it out. This is the Global Meteor Network's coverage mid-last year. So all the red areas are field of views at 100-kilometer altitude. I'm not sure why they always use that. We're a little sparse here.
Yeah.
But my camera is on that one. We'll get to that in a moment here, but this is an idea where they're at. That's why they were the biggest in my previous slide, is because we're now actually, I think Dennis, some of these slides are courtesy of Dennis Vitas, and he's a postdoctorate at Western University in Ontario. And he studies, he's one of the principals behind the whole project and the software and hardware. There's a lot of other people involved, but he's one of the big guys, and does a lot of the analysis, as a matter of fact, for falls. But we're up to about 900 stations now. It's the difference with the Global Meteor Network, and why I really like it is, and this was one of their founding principles, is it's open source software and open source data. So if you guys have a better idea for computing some particular functions in the software, you're free to go and look at it. It's above my pay grade, but the data is also open access. Now, the camera owners, the camera operators like myself or any of the others, I guess the data at the rawest form has to be used with our permission, but anything that we upload that gets transmitted to the central server is available, the final numbers and analysis that come out. And that's quite different than any other meteor network. That's one of the reasons I really like working with them. In particular, and because it's open access and readily published fast, you get high quality results really fast. For instance, what was this now? We're coming up on almost 2 years ago when the Tau Hercules happened. And the reason why I like using this slide, Dennis had a couple others to use, was I made an attempt to see this. This meteor outburst was predicted in 1995 when comet 73P Wasserman, if I'm saying that correctly, broke up. And there was speculation that if it broke up, would the particles be ejected in a manner that we would potentially intersect their orbit. So when it came along in 2022, I made a road trip. We were cloudy. Now, I had a camera operating, but we were cloudy. So I went out west of Wichita, Kingman Fishing Lake, if you guys have ever been in that area, which is a reasonably dark sky, and it was clear. And lo and behold, we had about 20 an hour. That was quite surprising. Now, there was some speculation, maybe even greater, which is going to draw my attention. I thought, oh man, it might be an outburst. I got to go see this. But even 20 was exciting because here was a prediction based on a comet breakup. This is very recent ejected material, and we did run into it. And this is the results of the Global Meteor Network data. So, let's talk a little bit about their station. It's based on, it's called RMS. They weren't particularly original, but it comes from Raspberry Pi Meteor station. It uses off-the-shelf, very inexpensive hardware. And it runs, the station runs like my station right now is on, although it's probably about time for it to wake up. What it does is the code calculates your local sunrise, sunset time, and then about a half hour before it gets dark, it starts recording video.
Is that just using a pi cam?
No, it's not. We will get to that.
Okay.
Close though, it's very close. You could probably use that. So what the station does is it watches the video feed coming off the camera at 25 frames per second. That's what they like, and there are some cameras that run faster. And it's constantly looking for fireballs or meteors. So it captures anything that it thinks is worthy of, being, that it's a possible meteor candidate. And in the morning, it goes back and looks for that. Now, fireballs, it actually saves, if it thinks it sees a fireball, it actually saves a piece of the video. But for just a routine detection like a little meteor, it's not really saving the video. This is different than an all-sky camera, and I'll show you why in a second here. But in the morning, it creates a bunch of reports and statistics and summaries, and then it uploads everything to the central server. I guess it's in Ontario, I don't know, and where they do further analysis, a little bit more data reduction. AI will probably come in handy on that, and you'll see here. Now, here is the way, I had to outdo I can't remember his name from last week. He had his line drawings, that he mentioned his little drawings for the telescope. So that's why I had to do at least one hand drawing here tonight. But this is what they suggest the system be. This is their standard setup: a Raspberry Pi 4B, no power supply. The camera is an IMX 291 camera module. There's a couple different lenses. Usually people use the 4mm. The camera module and the lens. I actually have a lens with me because I don't know what I did with it. I'll have to lock it and show you guys here in a second because it wasn't a good one. But that's the whole system right there. Now, I'll get to building it a little bit later, but it's really pretty simple and low cost. That was their whole goal.
Howard, what's the field of view on the camera?
Well, the 4mm, like I use I have 4mm right now. They're about 90 by 50 degrees, roughly. The 6 is a little bit less, and the 8 they recommend for people in more light pollution. The 4mm on that camera running 25 frames per second will go down to about 6 magnitude. So it's quite a bit different than the 21st you were mentioning earlier. But still, that's pretty decent at the frame rate. And that's what really impressed me from day one. This is a look, because at first you're thinking, well, this is just an all-sky camera. There's all-sky cameras everywhere. People have those hooked to a computer. But this is what the software at the station on the Raspberry Pi is doing at night. But we're not going to go over all this because I'm not an expert on what's going on. But basically, the video feed gets put into memory, and then they immediately look for fireballs. So they have algorithms that are looking at the raw video and look for the presence of a fireball. I'm sure they're looking at motion and magnitude and all that. I really hate they used FTP compression because it doesn't stand for FTP if you're a computer person. They really should have called it FFTP. It's a special format. They don't save video files. They save, it's called a 4-frame temporal pixel. They save like the maximum and the minimum. It's sort of a lossy thing. They can go back and reconstruct things. But anyway, in real time, while the station's running, it's looking, do I have stars? Tonight, my station's going to be saying, no stars detected. So it's not going to bother doing some of the other work. But if it is getting good stars, it goes through and actively tries to keep a good calibration, and we'll cover a little bit of that. But as you can see, this is a fairly sophisticated pipeline to process the video coming in.
That was all running on the Pi?
That's all running on the Pi. The 4B is what they recommend right now, and we'll cover that a little bit in building a station. I'll go into some details on that. This is my latest camera, and the first day I put it online. This is one of the files they create overnight. Like didn't mention it before, but it'll become apparent that they don't run these cameras as color. They are color, little color security cameras, but they only run them in black and white. In fact, we take the IR filter out of them as well. That's one of your steps in building, is to get rid of the IR filter. So in the morning, this was a file created 3/12. I'm sure it was 3/13, but that's what the camera detected and saved. Clearly, there's a lot of junk going on up there.
A lot of playing.
This is what the Pi reduced it to. So this is the captured, you saw the detected summary, which was just a JPEG, and this is the captured. There happened to be a halfway decent meteor that overnight, but it only made a few false detections you can clearly see. But they can go back and, in fact, what's interesting, the next slide, I wasn't sure what my order was, is that it identified, this is again a report the station made, because it's got its local database of stars and all kinds of data on it. And it's claiming that for these meteors that it saw, I think there were 36 it detected back there, were from this obscure Hercules meteor shower, XHE. I wasn't familiar with it, so it's clearly not a common one. So that was my first, the pictures you just saw are summary files that the station produces, and they came from my second station that I just put online. I got started with this about 2 years ago. I ran across an article in Make magazine, and they had written, one of the people involved in the project had written about building a meteor camera, and I was like, hey, this sounds interesting, and it's cheap, and it's within my capabilities. So I looked, no cameras around here. I was like, well, I think we can do something about this. And it fell right into my messing with computers and astronomy and imaging, so I was all on board on this. I ordered some parts, all of their links that we'll talk about a little bit later. Their suggested parts come from AliExpress, which is fine. It just takes a while to get here. I've got several little parts on the way right now on the boat coming across, so I think I ordered them 3 or 4 weeks ago. In fact, I just got an email this morning, and one of them, a filter, is hung up in customs. A piece of glass is hung up in customs for some odd reason. My first station I got is, they have a country code and then a number that they assign everybody. My first station was 2J, and it came online in March 2022. And just a few weeks ago, I put my second station 4L online. This was the first night focusing, here's the camera I built, and you're going to find that's not exactly, I was focusing it that night. You don't necessarily have to go through the same procedure I did, but I think any imager is going to want to try to focus it on stars. That's just the way to go. Of course, I had, Abby had to be there monitoring the situation. Apparently, there was quite a bit of snow on the ground 2 years ago. This was the first image that I captured. This is one frame, because it was running, it's a video camera, so it was feeding it at 25 frames per second. And when I saw that, I thought, this is unstretched, this is just 1/25th a second. I thought, wow, this is really pretty remarkable what it's picking up for a video camera. So I was sold at that point. So once I got it mounted, here we're going to cover some of the field of view. Like, I don't know where you meant we were talking about that one in western Missouri, whether it was over here or where it was. But once I got mine running, that's red. The dark greenish part is camera 2N coming out of Illinois, and I don't know precisely where their camera is, but they actually have 2 cameras there. I only showed you one. But prior to bringing 2J online, we didn't have any coverage. But now we got a little bit of coverage, but it's not, it needs companions. It just so happened last year, and I wasn't paying attention right at first because, as I'll mention later, most of last year I never even paid any attention to the station. It just works. But a gentleman down in Texas must have a dark sky site somewhere in Oklahoma down there. I forget the name of it. He's in a club that's got a dark sky site, and he's clearly got a little bit better phones than I do because he's put a bunch of cameras up. And 2 of the cameras I thought I'd highlight here, his camera is 2W and 4B. I We've actually had a number of pairing events in those overlap areas now. Now, this is at 100 kilometers, so it's really up there. You know, the 70, 50, 25 kilometer that we'd like to cover, this is more of a cone coming up from the ground, and we don't really have good overlap. That's why closer cameras would really be nice. When I put 4L online this month, now I've got a little bit more overlap over there. This would be an ideal. Wichita would be great to get some cameras in. I need to talk to Fred and group down there at the Afton Observatory, because maybe they've got a good location. It's on my to-do list.
They actually probably do have a really good location.
Yep. This is the New Mexico Meteor Network. They were one of the first in this country, and I ran out of colors to highlight all their fields. They have 28 stations. I think his name is Peter Eschman. He's one of the principal founding, early innovators in the Global Meteor Network, and they put a heck of a lot of cameras, so they have superb coverage. I'd like to see that around our area, because you can really get some, if you're going to have a fall like we were talking about before I started the presentation, if it happened in his area there, they would know probably down to a mile or less where it was, easily. So let's talk about building it, because you were asking some questions. First thing you need to figure out is, can you put a camera up somewhere? I have a lot of trees in my yard, and that was a problem. But that's why I only had one camera to start with. I couldn't simply put it on my house, like if you had an unobstructed view, or this building, for instance, going north or south, this would be a great spot too. What you'd want to do is find out where you can put the camera, and then review Global Meteor Network's wiki. I think it's still a work in progress. It's not a textbook. It's not something that's going to maybe lead you step by step, but it'll get you far enough along that you'll have some idea of what's involved here. This initial setup isn't plug and play like a ring camera that you mentioned. This is going to require a little bit of work, and I'll highlight it here in a minute. But once it's going, it's pretty much maintenance free. It just works. As long as it's got power, it's going to every day do its little thing before the night, upload the data. If it has some updates, it'll reboot itself. It's really pretty trouble-free. If you do think about building it, I would suggest right at first, and this is going to depend on your skill level. If you're pretty familiar with computers, networking, putting things together, you can probably deviate. If you understand what that means over there, then you can probably use anything you want. I don't use a Raspberry Pi for mine. When I built it in 2022, you probably couldn't buy a Raspberry Pi. Between COVID, their production schedule being off, they were unobtainable. So I run mine on an old Core i5. Let's look at the basics. But if you don't have the skill, I would stay with this, and there's a reason why. This is the current recommended setup, a Raspberry Pi 4B, 4 gig RAM version. Use their official power supply. People always make a problem. Oh, I've got a 5-volt supply laying around, I'll use it instead. And it doesn't quite handle the peak power that thing will want. You need a high-quality micro SD card, and this is one reason, and I'll deviate here a second, why I didn't use a Pi, even if I'd had one available. When you're reading and writing 5 or 10 gigabit of data at night, SD cards just aren't made for that. But they will work, but you just have to anticipate that in a year you might have to swap out the card. You most certainly will need a fan cool case or a heatsink on the 4B Pi, because while it's running that software that we saw the flowchart of earlier, it has some pretty high CPU spikes as it's looking through. It's performing some heavy lifting on the math. You probably will need another computer to set everything up. I wrote down that you need the CMS software to focus, but I was reading their wiki the other day and I thought, well, I guess they've got an alternative way around it. But again, that's something you could review and see what you're involved with. So that's the computer part of it. You could substitute something else. If if you had an old, there's going to be literally tens of thousands of computers retired in the next year because Windows 11 doesn't support some of the hardware. Well, those would make great little Meteor RMS stations. I mean, all of those are more than powerful enough. Heck, a laptop would run it just fine. This is the camera. I mentioned before, it uses an IMX291 module. Those are just little boards. They're 38 millimeters square. They've got like a little embedded Linux operating system in them. So they just stream video out for surveillance. You need a little lens. Those two items put together are only about $35. The housing, and that's the official housing right there. That's the best picture I could find of it. But you'll see another one in a second. It's probably the most expensive part. However, that's really easy to work with. It's got a lot of room in it, so it's good for someone that's not particularly handy with screws and the little pieces to put together. Now, as an alternative, because I know a couple of you can do that, Mike Mazur, if I'm saying his name correctly, he's another one from Western University. He created a little 3D printable module here that's really compact. So, I mean, if you guys want to take a peek at it, this was just printed in PLA. I don't think I would put that out in the sun. And it needs a couple little pieces on top. The filter I ordered hung up in customs needs to be glued on the top. But
You're putting everything in this that's
well,
in that?
yes, that everything that's in that. Let me go to the next slide. There is all the pieces that this is one of their pictures. There's the actual camera module, the imaging module, which I hadn't mentioned. That's got a Sony first generation Starvis back illuminated CMOS sensor in it. It's why it's particularly good for this purpose. Here's the little lens that goes with it, and I have one, I think, in my coat pocket. But that's the whole setup. The one nice thing about this case, is that it comes with that bracket and all that. But that little printed thing, if you were to print it out of PETG or ASA, would be fantastic to use. And it's very compact. So that's a kit. It's really not much to it. You just need to find somewhere to put it. I think so far you can see. Here's my setup. Yes, I actually put my camera on a tree. Well, I was a little uncertain. It was my best spot. I didn't want to, try to trench in a line or whatever. So I thought, I'll put it on a tree and run an overhead wire. Asking for lightning trouble, I am. But these are some of the final steps once you've got your camera. And again, this is just an overview. You need to go through and read things so you have we could have a whole workshop on building this. And if someone was interested, I'd be more than happy to put that on. But once you've got everything together and assembled, you need to configure the camera, because it's going to come with an IP address that you need to change. You need to focus it, as you saw I did in one slide. Then you're going to need to mount and point it. That's where I ran into a little bit of an issue. And that's where you might, unless you're at something like NECAL or something, you might run into an issue as well. I'd originally intended to point a little bit past south. But the first night I had the camera up, I didn't realize how bad I was going to get hit by car headlights. Even though the camera's 40-degree pointing up, I couldn't believe, all the reflections I was getting on it. So I had to slightly alter my pointing. I think at the time Dennis was like, you keep changing the location of your camera because I was getting help. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I do. So now I know I can do some of this on my own, but you let the camera run overnight because you want to collect some images. And from those images, you're going to make a few things. One is a mask, for instance, and I should have brought it. Essentially, if you've got some trees or building in your view, you're going to mask those out, and the camera software uses that. It was even mentioned back there. So it avoids detecting anything in that area, because trees move, car headlights illuminate things. Then you also have to calibrate it. This gets a little bit, Dennis originally did that for me, and I don't know how much time he has, but I could certainly help someone, or if you want to go through the process. This is one of the summary files that's created in the morning, and it looks a lot like a program that you would use on the RMS station. to calibrate it. In other words, these little lenses, let me see if it's in my pocket over here, cost like $5 or $6. So you're not exactly buying the best optical system. You know, they're oh darn, what did I do with that thing? I guess I didn't bring it. They have a lot of distortion. You know, a 4mm lens is, it's quite. So what you have to do is you run one of their utilities and you do a plate solve and you match up the stars, and then you apply some formulas they've created, some mustache and barrel distortion formulas, until you get your error down. When you start off, you're going to have all these yellow or lime green circles are matched stars. When you start off, things are just not going to mesh at all. You know, you're going to have stars. You know, like this was probably Orion that night. At some point in this picture is probably that, and you know, getting the common stars to fit, I was having a heck of a time in the program. But once you get it right, you just save it, and essentially, it's not this graphics file. This is the morning's report that tells me, you know, that tells the station how good it's doing, and this isn't bad. I mean, these lines look bad, but they're times 100 error, so it's really not as bad as it looks.
How low a magnitude are you going in the stars?
About 6.
6.
Yeah. About 6 with this, at 25 frames a second. And if you can run a little faster, that's even better, but that's what you're going to get out of the basic setup, is 25 frames per second.
For plate solving, does it have the software built in, or do you need to pair it with something like this?
No, it's built right into that workflow that you saw earlier. They wrote it all in Python. So they've brought in all the well-established astronomy libraries and imaging libraries. So they were able to bring in other pieces and then just build on top of it. So they've built, in essence, a pipeline that they feed things through procedures. So they do plate solve. This was the morning's result for that morning, and it plate solved it and said, this is your error. Clearly I've got some problems over there, but it's not bad for this lens. So the final steps, you've gotten that far. Your camera's up there, it's working, it's focused and all that. You may have already done this ahead of time. You obtain a station ID from, I said the coordinator, but Dennis is the guy right now. And you need to provide your SSH key. This is where we're getting into whether or not you know computers much, but they'll help you. On a Unix system, you have a key you can generate. They do a secure FTP, so there's no password, but you provide your public key to them, and then that identifies your station. So there's secure data transmission between your PC and them, and they know, hey, it's station 2J or 4L. And once that's going, then you let them know, and they'll keep an eye on it. And if everything looks good, they'll be like saying, hey, great, welcome to the network, thanks. So that's all it really is to a camera. See, it's pretty simple. No, actually, it's not too bad. And if anyone really is interested in doing this, I'd be more than happy to help at any stage of the game. If we can get the more cameras we can get up, the better. That's my goal. So when another one of those meteors that you mentioned, those events, happens, we'll have some idea where the darn thing landed. And we can have our own recovery, and my gosh, you know, I don't know as much about meteorites as you do, but I suspect that the value of a meteorite that's been seen coming has got to be astronomical.
Witness fall can be very profitable.
Yeah, so this would, I'm sure, I don't know how it works. This is getting out of my realm, but I don't even know if you can, how that would work on public or private land and all that. You know, in the States, it's kind of, you know, I don't know.
Generally, you have to, if you're going to search, you got to contact the landowner and just write a real simple contract says, 10% of any proceeds that come from anything I find will go to you, or whatever.
So that's the standard of how it's done.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on, you know, where it is and, you know, whether the guy who owns the property is a lawyer or farmer.
Well, you never know these days, because it's interesting. I was looking at my Douglas County has an excellent property map system. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at it. You maybe don't, because I live more rural out here. south of Eudora. They use an ArcGIS backend, so you can zoom in and see. You can right-click, who owns it, what property taxes do they pay? You know, of course, I did that recently because I got my assessment. I'm like, what? You know, seriously? But it is amazing, the different ownerships out there. There's some construction company that owns quite a bit of land around me. Very interesting to learn. But yeah, look up Douglas County Property Viewer. It's really quite interesting to peruse.
There's an app you can get for hunting that it's a nationwide app.
Right.
That has all of that.
But Douglas County has a superb one. You can zoom in, see past pictures. You can see what the neighbors got. You're not my way, you know, with several acres, you can see the neighbors actually got 500 cars stashed back there. You know, which is true of one of my neighbors, not that I care. But another file that this generates, and I'll just get it started, is this will make, if you optionally turn this on, this is what the camera sees overnight. So this was that night, 3/12. All these examples I'm showing you from the station. Airplanes, that bright flash, that's cars. I'm actually amazed this camera points more west, and it just blows my mind how far off some headlights are.
There's Orion there.
Yep, you can see Orion. Isn't that amazing? I mean, we're not even getting the best possible. It's just crazy what this picks up at this frame rate.
That's true.
This, I think, also makes for a really good, there's a website that if you go to the Glocal Meteor Network.org, they have several, the web blog there has a list of all the cameras, and all of the summary files like this are listed on it for every night.
I do too. I like the way it comes in.
But this, I think, makes a really good outreach thing. For instance, like if you wanted to feature it on your website, your webpage, Western Australia has quite an outreach effort going on. And the reason why I know that is that February we had the annual meeting online, a Zoom meeting online for the Glocal Meteor Network. And there was a woman and a man presented their outreach program they're doing over there, and people really love this video stuff. I mean, they really like it. You know, it's really popular over there in New Zealand. I should have created the field of view map. They're just blanketed. UK, there's several countries. South Korea like exploded in the past 9 months with Global Meteor Network cameras out there.
They got other concerns.
But this is a kind of a cool little feature that's it gets everybody's imagination. I think it's a good outreach thing that clubs could leverage if you think about putting up a camera somewhere. Because people like, you know, TikTok, Instagram, and everything else. And that's one of the things. And there's the end of the day. And then that's how, see, that calibration file, you just needed to capture, there's files that are saved on your meteor station from the night that you can generate those calibration files, the mask and all that. If we were to go back, let me show you one last little doodad here. This was from an Australian camera. You can see up there, this is a Fireball file. That's actually the name that would have come off the station. So this is station AU 29. I'm assuming that's Australia. I could be wrong. That's the date and timestamp. So that's something I didn't mention. That let me go back a second, because there'll probably be somebody, I can see at least one person back there that's thinking, well, I could use a Raspberry Pi 5 or something, which would be kind of handy because a Pi 4 does not have an onboard real-time clock. Now, if you've got an internet connection all the time, I don't see that as a problem, because most computers sync time through network time protocol, the NTP. I don't see it as a real problem, but they do want the time of the station on the money. In fact, it's just common, everybody runs the station in UTC, you know, to avoid all the problems that come from time zones and all that other things. But this was a capture from theirs back, I guess it was September of last year. The software on the Meteor station, that would have shown up in one of your pictures. You would have had a picture there in the station files of that Meteor. But you can also generate, this is an example of the video they actually save. They can it can be recreated from the files your station
Ooh.
generates. Which is really interesting because right off the bat you can see the meteor that we see, that's not a streak, it's just a point of light.
That's
The
where it
cameras.
exploded. And
Yeah.
you see the little
Not only does it
pieces.
blow up, it breaks apart.
Yeah.
This was a good example of that. So this came off that station right there, but the software, all the RMS software created all this for, somebody else made this, I didn't make it, but you can see the frame rate that it's running, and it'd really be nice if you could run a camera at like 50 frames a second, because you get an even better detailed look at, like, for instance, that fragmentation that happens at the end there.
But that would be one that you'd want to have other angles of, so you could triangulate that.
Yeah, it looks like that one might have broke up, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that one made it to the ground or not, but I ran across this in the files. I was like, oh, this is a good example, I gotta show them that. But that does, this region of interest is the only real video they keep, they store in this, in their own, that's not proprietary, but their own custom files.
So it's just that little segment.
That little part right there,
Right.
that's, exactly.
Is what they keep, and then that's just,
Right, and the station, that little Raspberry Pi figured all that out. Now, this is actually a utility, a Python utility you run after the fact. You say, oh, I know I had a fireball at this time. I want you to go generate this file for me. And it takes all the data it has and crunches it down into that, yeah.
so does this have to plate solve every night when it turns on?
It's constantly for plate solving,
Yeah.
constantly. Because, and this brings up an interesting point, at the annual meeting, there's a gentleman named Luke. I don't know if he's in Europe or America. He sounded French.
Skywalker?
Use the force. He had actually, there's a method to why, my madness why I'm bringing this up. He had actually been looking at using Glocal Meteor Network data for another purpose, and he ran into an issue where he found some of the cameras weren't running correctly. Mine turned out to be one of them. He submitted a patch to the code that now generates a report in the morning that shows frame jitter, if you want to call it that. How far we deviate from 25 frames per second. So, where was I going with that?
Yeah, I think Super 8 was 16 frames per second.
Well, I lost my train of thought there, why I brought up Luke, but one point is that he looked at the software and submitted some updates to it. I'm trying to think of why I wanted to bring that up, but now it's completely gone. Sorry about that.
There was something about that they were noticing cameras that were missing.
Yeah, that weren't. Oh, yes, you're right, thank you. You just got me back on track, you're awesome. It was also brought up that he was looking at the fact that, yes, they're doing plate solving throughout the night because there's a drift that happens. And they originally thought they were having problems with camera mountings or whatever. You actually get a report in the morning of what has happened to your field of view in relationship to the stars over the course of the night. And it's come out that it's actually an error in the way, in what epoch they're using to plate solve against, and how the shift, if they say, okay, at this moment in time at night we're using J2000, there's a slight, instead of J now, there's a slight drift over the night because of the shifting of the stars. So it's brought up the whole, the people that were in the conference got off into a whole tangent there that was above my pay grade of trying to figure out how they're going to solve this issue. But for now, there is a drift that happens. So yes, they are constantly plate solving. So that's my presentation on the network. I have an ulterior motive that I just hope that if I touch enough people, somebody's going to start putting up more cameras. So questions?
So do you expect to get a phone call one of these days and say, grab your shovel and go to this coordinate, and you think this might be the spot?
Well, that's actually has been discussed, I know, in the online groups, especially the New Zealand one, because there were like 3 GMM cameras involved in triangulating it, and it's been discussed that people should plan for it, yes.
That'd
Yes,
be kind of fun.
it would be fun. In fact, the guy...
You wouldn't really need a shovel.
No, it was laying right on the ground.
Yep.
There was a if you get a chance, go to the Global Meteor Network's website and look for the link to the YouTube. They recorded the 2024 annual meeting, and there was a presentation towards the end, I think, of the first session, because they break it up for people around the world. And they discussed trying to find the fall that happened in Germany, and I think that, again, that was late 2023. It could have been early 2024, I don't remember. My point being is that, yes, after some wind calculations and the number of cameras, including the All Sky Network and CAMs and GMN, there were a lot of networks that produced data where the fall could be, the wind had thrown things off. But the rocks they found on the ground were not what people expected. They were not dark covered rocks at all. They looked more like river rock. And they had walked past them, had not recognized them as a meteor at all, until they got some more refined calculations.
Here it is.
Yep. Oh, is that the New Zealand one?
Yeah, 3 days ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where, that one was really, it was quite a stir on the network there because of the cameras being involved. And the guy that turned in the initial observation, well, he actually notified the network, because I didn't mention this, it gets complicated to throw everything the station does in, but they've recently added a capability they call event monitor. So what they do is, if something happens, the station every 30 minutes checks to see if a new event needs to be looked into. So they can look into, they can check the station's files before it's actually uploaded. Or they can tell the station, hey, there was something that happened within a few miles of you, or tens of kilometers or whatever. And can you check your records to see if you've got additional data on it to help triangulate things? And that's how several stations got involved, because they pushed out a message, computer message to the stations that then said, oh yeah, we picked this up.
Yeah, I was watching a video of a New Zealand news program when the day they found it, and they were interviewing one of the guys that was on the team.
Was he the blonde-haired guy?
And he said, "We found the bastard."
They're awesome to listen to. I've got a couple clips of that because it was so fun to listen to them. And they're just so excited about it.
Oh yeah. Well, that's only the 10th meteorite that's ever been found in New Zealand.
Right.
So
I forgot you were totally into this, that you would know all about this. I forgot that.
now one like that, because of the way it was seen before it was found, depending upon what type of a meteorite, probably just a ordinary chondrite, but they can go for as much witness falls or predicted falls like that, as much as $1,000 a gram, right when it's fresh.
Because wasn't that like a 70 gram or something like that?
Yeah, the one stone is the only thing I've seen a picture of. I'm sure there's more than one stone.
Yeah, I think
They
it
just
is.
gotta keep looking. for other
Yes, sir.
ones.
Yeah, what kind of investment's required to put up a station?
What kind of what?
Investment.
Oh, really? It's not much. Now, I would guess if you were going to buy a Raspberry Pi and a camera and do it all yourself, because I think you're pretty do-it-yourself, you're probably only looking at about $250. I mean, that's buying a Raspberry Pi. I mean, if you can repurpose an old computer, do that.
I've got a couple of Pis.
Now, you need a 4B probably.
Yeah, what about the computer, or the camera?
That camera, if you buy that module, that's only $35.
Really?
Yeah, and if you did something like this, if you can 3D print or know someone that can in a better material. Now, this doesn't have all the pieces, but, if anyone has any questions, you can email me. The email address is always on the newsletter. And I can send you a link. Mike Mazur, that designed this, put this on printables, so you could look for his name. There's the little cap that goes in here, a bracket he made. There's another ring that goes on top, and you essentially silicone glass on top of this. Now, I'm waiting on the slow boat is coming. The way it was made with these holes in here, he designed it to where you put in threaded inserts. So you use like a soldering iron to push in a threaded insert. So you put some little brass inserts in here and then mount the camera module in there. So it's really pretty simple. Now personally, if you're gonna build it, if you do wanna think about building one, I would change the design a little since we're going into this topic. They use, if you remember, let's go back here and I'll show you. Just want to go back here, we'll go back to my diagram here.
I'm surprised at the use of light colors, you know, the inside of my telescope's as dark as I can.
Well, that was the first doggone thing I said to him. I said, how come he didn't dual print it? You know?